The summer air carried that kind of stillness that makes you think twice about breathing too loudly. In Clearwater, Virginia, folks said the old Blackwood mansion hadn't heard a living footstep in over half a century. But on that warm July evening, a college girl and her K-9 partner were about to prove everybody wrong. Emily Carter wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. 19 years old, home from her first year at the University of Richmond, she had more worries about finals and gas money than about haunted houses. But that didn't stop the gossip around town. Blackwood Hill, with its sprawling oaks and that crumbling 150-year-old mansion, had been the subject of whispers since long before she was born. The legend was always the same: lights flickering in windows when no one lived there, sounds of crying children drifting down the hill, shadows moving in locked rooms. Even the bravest kids in town didn't dare cross its iron gates after dark. Emily, though, had a different problem. A German shepherd named Coda. Coda wasn't your average house dog. He was a retired police K-9, trained to sniff out drugs, track suspects, and protect his handler at all costs. Emily's father, a former deputy, had brought him home after an injury forced the department to retire him. Since then, Coda had become Emily's shadow, never more than a few steps behind, ears always perked, eyes sharp as a hawk's. That evening, Emily had been walking Coda along the back roads when a low growl rumbled from his chest. He froze, nose high, ears swiveling toward the trees. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, following his gaze. Through the thinning twilight, the outline of Blackwood Mansion loomed on the hill. Its roof sagged in places, windows boarded or shattered, but the front door, usually chained and locked, hung open. Just enough to let the shadows inside breathe. Emily's stomach tightened. No one had gone in there in decades. Everyone knew the county posted "no trespassing" signs, not just for liability, but because the place was unsafe. Still, that door yawned open like an invitation. "All right," she muttered, unclipping Coda's leash. "Let's take a quick look, just a look." Coda growled again and tugged at his leash, pulling her toward the gates. Emily hesitated. The smart thing to do would have been to turn around, walk home, and pretend she'd never seen it. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She wanted to know. The iron gates groaned as she pushed them open. The gravel crunched under her sneakers, and every step toward the mansion felt heavier. Coda padded ahead, silent now, his nose sweeping the ground. When they reached the porch, Emily paused. Up close, the house smelled of mildew and old wood. The paint peeled in strips, revealing gray planks beneath. A broken lantern swayed from the ceiling, creaking in the breeze. Coda's tail stiffened. He nosed the door, then looked back at her. Emily swallowed hard, raised her phone flashlight, and stepped inside. The entryway stretched wide, with ceilings so tall her light barely touched the plaster. Dust floated like snow in the beam, disturbed only by Coda's movement. The air was stale, heavy, carrying the scent of iron and damp earth. The walls bore portraits: stern men in suits, women in lace gowns, children in sailor clothes, all from another century. But someone at some point had taken a knife or blade to every canvas. Eyes were slashed out, smiles erased. Emily shuddered. "That's not creepy at all," Coda growled softly, his gaze locked on the staircase. Emily followed it. One of the steps was darker than the rest, the wood splintered as if forced open. "Coda, wait," she whispered as he bounded up. He stopped at the landing and barked once, sharp and commanding. Emily hurried up the steps, her shoes slipping on the dust. She crouched beside him, shining her light where his paw pressed against the floorboards. The beam caught something metallic wedged between the planks. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it free. It was an old key. Iron, ornate, heavier than anything she'd ever held. A faint engraving, the initials CB, gleamed under her light. "What in the world?" she whispered. But before she could examine it further, a crash echoed from the hallway. Wood splintering, glass breaking. Coda leapt into position, teeth bared, growl reverberating through the empty house. Emily's heart pounded. "Hello?" she called, her voice breaking. "Is someone there?" Silence. only the echo of her own words swallowed by the mansion's walls. Coda barked once more, then trotted forward. Emily followed reluctantly, her flashlight shaking in her hand. The hallway stretched on, lined with rooms whose doors sagged on rusted hinges. From one of them drifted a cold draft, though no window should have been open. Emily nudged the door with her foot. Inside, the moonlight poured through a shattered window, illuminating an old trunk shoved against the wall. Coda sniffed it, then pawed at the lock. "No way," Emily murmured. She crouched, brushing away decades of grime. The lock was rusted but still intact. She glanced at the key in her hand. Could it really? Her breath caught as the key slid in smoothly, clicking once before the lid creaked open. Inside lay stacks of yellowed documents, faded photographs, and what looked like an embroidered cloth wrapped around something heavy. Emily reached in and lifted the bundle. The cloth disintegrated at her touch, leaving behind a silver locket. Its clasp was broken, but initials, again CB, were carved into its back. She flipped it open. Inside was a tiny photograph. A young girl with braided hair, wearing a dress that belonged to another century. Her eyes seemed to follow Emily through the dust and dark. Coda whined, ears flat. "Okay," Emily whispered, backing away. "This is way above my pay grade." She stuffed the locket and key into her pocket, grabbed her phone, and stumbled toward the front door. Every creak of the floorboards behind her felt like footsteps following. Every gust of wind moaned through, the halls like a voice calling her name. By the time she burst outside, her lungs ached and her hands shook. Coda bounded out after her, hackles still raised. The door slammed shut behind them on its own. Halfway down the hill, Emily finally slowed. Bending over with her hands on her knees, "What did we just find?" she panted. Coda pressed against her leg, eyes still locked on the house. Emily pulled out the locket again, studying the face of the girl. Something about it tugged at her memory, something she couldn't quite place. Her phone buzzed with a message from her best friend, Ryan Blake, a rookie officer at the Clearwater Police Department. "You still alive? Thought I saw you heading up Blackwood Hill." Emily stared at the screen. For the first time in her life, she wanted to call the police. Not because of ghosts or legends, but because something very real was hidden in that house. She typed back, "Ryan, we need to talk. Urgently. And friends, before I go any further, if you love stories where loyal dogs uncover hidden mysteries and protect their humans at all costs, make sure you hit that subscribe button to our channel, Heroes for Animals. We share incredible tales like Coda's every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next." Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat at her desk with the locket and key laid out in front of her. Coda lay at her feet, ears twitching. Every time a branch tapped the window, the documents from the trunk still lingered in her mind. She hadn't dared to look at them all, but she remembered the dates scrawled on the envelopes: 1892, 1894, 1896. The handwriting elegant, but smudged with what looked like water stains, or maybe something darker. And that photograph, that girl. Emily searched online for the Blackwood family, but most records were scattered or incomplete. She found only fragments: a wealthy family that once owned half the county, a tragedy that wiped them from history, rumors of a daughter who disappeared without explanation. The initials matched: Clara Blackwood. Emily's hand shook as she typed the name into the search bar. Nothing but vague mentions in century-old newspapers. A missing child. No resolution. Coda raised his head, ears flicking toward the door. A second later, Emily heard it too. A soft creak on the porch. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She grabbed the key and locket, shoved them in a drawer, and flicked off her desk lamp. The room fell into darkness. Coda stood now, muscles tense, his growl low and steady. Emily crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. The porch was empty. But on the glass, written in the condensation, were two words that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Don't open." Emily stumbled back, her breath caught in her throat. Coda barked, loud and fierce, shaking the house. And somewhere up on Blackwood Hill, the mansion's shutters slammed in unison, as if the whole house had taken a breath. Emily Carter didn't turn on her bedroom light that night. Instead, she sat cross-legged on her bed, the locket and iron key laid carefully on the blanket in front of her. The faint glow from her phone screen painted her face pale as she scrolled through historical archives and old newspapers. Coda lay, stretched across her bedroom rug, eyes fixed on the door, ears twitching with every sound outside. He hadn't stopped growling since they came back from the mansion. Even now his chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. Emily whispered, more to calm herself than him. It's just the wind, boy. Just the wind. But deep down she knew it wasn't. The writing on her window, those words, "Don't open," were still burned into her mind. She zoomed in on a scanned page from an 1894 issue of the Clearwater Gazette. The headline read, "Blackwood heiress missing, family in mourning." The article was brief, almost dismissive, like it had been written to keep gossip under control. Clara Blackwood, age 8, vanished from her family estate on July 14, 1894. No signs of forced entry. Authorities suspect she may have wandered off. The family declined to comment further. Emily stared at the date, July 14th. The same night she and Coda had gone inside. A coincidence, maybe, but it felt like something more. She touched the locket, again running her thumb over the initials CB. "Clara Blackwood," she whispered. Coda's growl deepened. He was on his feet now, body angled toward the front door. Emily froze, and then 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. Her heart skipped. No one should have been out here at midnight, not on her family's farmhouse porch. Coda barked once, sharp as a gunshot. He charged the door, nails scraping the wood floor. Emily grabbed her phone, thumb hovering over Ryan Blake's number, but before she could call, silence fell. No footsteps retreating, no voice. Nothing but the summer crickets outside. Her whole body trembled. She stayed awake until dawn, lights off, back pressed against the wall, while Coda guarded the door like a soldier. By morning, Emily's nerves were frayed. She barely tasted her coffee, staring blankly out the kitchen window. Her parents were away for the week visiting her aunt in North Carolina, leaving her with the house to herself. Normally, that would have been a blessing. But now, she wished, more than anything, that she wasn't alone. Ryan Blake showed up just after 9. His cruiser pulled up the gravel driveway, the morning sun flashing off the windshield. Emily hurried out to meet him, Coda trotting by her side. Ryan climbed out, stretching his tall frame. He wasn't much older than Emily, just 21, but already carried himself like someone trying to prove he belonged in uniform. His brown hair stuck up in the back like he'd rolled straight out of bed. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said, giving her a half smile. Emily didn't laugh. "I think someone was at my house last night." Ryan's smile faded. "What do you mean?" She told him everything. The open door at the mansion, the trunk, the key, the locket, the photograph, and the message written on her window. Ryan listened, arms folded, eyes narrowing. When she finished, he shook his head. "Emily, you know trespassing that property is illegal, right?" "I know," she snapped. "But this isn't about that. Someone was here. Someone followed me home." Coda barked, as if to back her up. Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, let's say I believe you. What do you want me to do? Bring in a report about a 100-year-old necklace?" Emily pulled the locket from her pocket, thrusting it toward him. "This belonged to a missing girl. Look at the initials. CB Clara Blackwood. She disappeared on July 14th, 1894. Last night was July 14th. Ryan hesitated, staring at the locket. For a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes, but then he sighed again, handing it back. "Even if it's real, that's history, not a crime today." "Then what about the people who came to my porch? You think they're history too?" Ryan didn't answer. He looked at Coda, then back at her. "All right, I'll check into the Blackwood records, see what I can dig up. But you need to stay away from that mansion, Emily, promise me." Emily pressed her lips together. She didn't promise. That afternoon, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, Emily drove back toward Blackwood Hill. She told herself it was reckless, that Ryan was right, that she should leave it alone. But something in her gut told her she couldn't. Coda rode in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears perked. He was alert, as if he knew exactly where they were going. The mansion looked different in daylight. Less haunted, more broken. Vines crept up the walls, shutters dangled from rusted hinges, and the yard was a jungle of weeds. But the open door still gaped, daring them to enter. Emily parked at the edge of the property and clipped Coda's leash. "Okay, boy," she whispered. "Just a quick look, then we're out." Inside, the air felt cooler than outside, damp and heavy. Dust swirled in golden shafts of light cutting through broken windows. Coda moved ahead, nose to the ground. He stopped suddenly at the base of the grand staircase, pawing at the wall. Emily shone her flashlight. The wallpaper there had peeled, revealing seams of wood. She pressed her hand against it and felt a hollow echo. A door. She searched until she found a small keyhole hidden behind the torn wallpaper. Her pulse quickened. Slowly, she slid the iron key inside. It turned with a grinding click. The panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway descending into darkness. Emily's throat tightened. "No way!" Coda barked once, tail stiff. Together they stepped into the hidden passage. The tunnel sloped downward, lined with stone walls slick with moss. The air grew colder with each step, smelling of earth and rust. Emily's phone flashlight barely lit more than a few feet ahead. Her sneakers scuffed against damp stone. Coda's claws clicked softly. Every sound echoed back at them, multiplying. In the dark, at the end of the tunnel, an iron gate stood locked, its bars thick and blackened with age. Strange symbols were carved into the walls around it. Circles, crosses, markings she couldn't make sense of. Coda snarled, hackles rising. He pressed against the gate, barking fiercely. Emily's heart pounded. She pulled him back, whispering, "Shh, it's okay." But her own voice shook. She tested the gate. It didn't budge. Whatever lay beyond it was sealed away. Then, faintly, she heard something, not the creak of wood or the scuttle of rats. Something softer, a sound that chilled her more than anything else. A child's laugh, high-pitched, echoing. Emily staggered back, phone trembling in her hand. "No, no, no, no," Coda barked furiously, lunging at the bars. The laughter faded, leaving only silence. Emily ran. She didn't stop until she and Coda burst back into the sunlight, gasping for air. Back in her car, she gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "We're calling Ryan," she muttered. Coda whined, resting his head on her arm. But as she reached for her phone, something on the mansion's upper floor caught her eye. A curtain shifted, just slightly, as if someone had been standing there, watching her leave. That night, Emily sat at her desk again, the locket on one side, the key on the other. She typed everything into her journal, forcing herself to remember every detail. The passageway, the gate, the symbols, the laughter. Her phone buzzed. Ryan again. Checked town records. Blackwoods had one daughter, Clara. Disappeared without a trace. Case closed in 1895. Parents died a year later. House left empty since. Emily stared at the message, her skin prickling. Closed didn't mean solved. It meant abandoned. She typed back, "There's more. Much more. Meet me tomorrow. I'll show you." Coda shifted uneasily, his eyes on the window again. Emily followed his gaze. In the distance, beyond the fields, Blackwood Mansion loomed under the moonlight. One of its upstairs windows glowed faintly. Not bright, not like electricity, more like the flicker of a candle flame. Emily swallowed hard. "We're in this now, boy." Coda growled low, as if he already knew. Emily Carter had barely slept. Even with the farmhouse doors locked and Coda curled up on the rug, she'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of that laugh in her mind. Now, in the morning light, everything felt less terrifying, almost dreamlike. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe the darkness of that tunnel had gotten into her head. But the memory of Coda's furious barking said otherwise. Dogs didn't imagine things. Ryan Blake sat across from her at Miller's Diner, the kind of greasy spoon every small town relied on. The vinyl booths were cracked, the coffee weak, but the pancakes were legendary. Ryan's plate was stacked high, but he hadn't touched a bite. His eyes were fixed on her, skeptical but uneasy. "You're telling me you heard a little girl's laugh," he said finally, stirring his untouched coffee. "Yes," Emily answered firmly. "I heard it, Ryan. And Coda did too." Ryan sighed. Dogs bark at echoes, at shadows. Emily leaned across the table, lowering her voice. "You think Coda spent years tracking down criminals just to start barking at shadows now? You've seen him work. He doesn't make mistakes." Ryan had to admit that was true. He'd seen Coda in action back when he was just a high school kid tagging along with the deputies during career ride-alongs. The dog had been sharper than most officers. Still, the thought of an actual voice echoing through a locked tunnel made his stomach twist. "Even if you did hear something," he said slowly, "it doesn't explain who's been at your house, or why someone cares about what's inside that place." Emily pulled the iron key from her pocket and set it on the table with a heavy clink. "Then we need to go back." Ryan's fork slipped against his plate. "Go back? Emily? You want me to risk my badge trespassing in a condemned building because you think a ghost giggled at you?" Emily smirked, though her hands trembled. "Ghosts don't write warnings on windows." Ryan didn't have an answer for that. Coda barked once from under the booth as if to end the argument. By the time they reached Blackwood Hill again, storm clouds were gathering. The wind stirred the tall grass around the mansion, carrying with it the smell of rain and something metallic. Ryan parked his cruiser at the base of the hill. "Last chance," he said, turning to Emily. "We walk up there, we're officially breaking the law. You sure about this?" Emily tightened her grip on Coda's leash. "I have to know." The mansion loomed darker than before, the open door swaying slightly in the wind like it was waiting for them. Inside, the air was damp and heavy. Dust floated in their flashlight beams, swirling like restless spirits. Ryan clicked on his body cam out of habit, though technically he wasn't supposed to be here. Coda took the lead, nose low, tail stiff. He guided them down the hallway toward the hidden passage Emily had discovered. She peeled back the torn wallpaper and showed Ryan the keyhole. "See for yourself," she said. Ryan crouched, running his finger over the frame. The wood was fresher than he expected, less brittle than the rest of the house. "This isn't from the 1800s, he muttered. "Somebody's been working on this." Emily's pulse quickened. "Then it's not just history." The key turned, smoothly again, the panel swinging open to reveal the narrow staircase. Cold air wafted up, smelling of wet stone. Ryan exhaled hard. "All right, let's take a look." The tunnel swallowed them in damp silence. Ryan's flashlight swept across, carvings etched into the stone walls, symbols Emily hadn't recognized before. Circles with slashes, triangles, and strange letters. Some were fresh, like they'd been carved in the last few years. "What do you think they mean?" Emily whispered. "Could be gang symbols, could be nonsense. Could be both," Ryan said. Coda's nose twitched. He pulled forward, straining against the leash until they reached the iron gate. Ryan's beam landed on it and froze. "Hold up," he said. "Look at this." Emily followed his light. The old padlock that had sealed the gate before was gone. In its place was a modern combination lock, shiny and new. Her throat went dry. "Ryan, that means someone's been here recently," Coda growled, pressing his body against the bars, barking sharply. The sound bounced off the walls, echoing down the passage. Ryan tested the lock. It was secure. "I can't open this without bolt cutters," he muttered. Suddenly, from beyond the gate, came a faint rustle. Then a soft metallic clang, like a chain being dragged across stone. Emily's heart leapt. "You heard that, right?" Ryan nodded grimly, flashlight steady. "Yeah, I heard it." Then, clear as day, a voice, but not a child's this time. A man's voice, low and rough, muttering words they couldn't quite make out. Coda barked violently, lunging forward. The voice stopped. Silence swallowed the tunnel again. Emily clutched Ryan's arm. Tell me you got that on your body cam. Ryan swallowed, his mouth dry. I think so. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Finally, Ryan tugged Emily's sleeve. We're leaving. Now. Back in the daylight, both of them looked shaken. The storm finally broke overhead, rain pounding the ground, turning the dirt road into mud. Ryan tossed his flashlight into the cruiser, running a hand over his wet hair. That wasn't a ghost, Emily, that was a man. Emily shivered, clutching Coda's collar. Then what the hell is he doing under there? Ryan didn't answer. He didn't want to. But as he drove her home, windshield wipers thudding, Emily noticed something in the back of the cruiser, muddy footprints smeared across the floor mats. Ryan, she said slowly. Those weren't there before. Ryan frowned, glancing back. What are you talking about? I cleaned the car yesterday. The prints were small. Too small for an adult man. Emily's blood turned cold. They look like a child's. That evening, unable to sit still, Emily spread the photographs from the trunk across her bedroom floor. Most were stiff portraits of the Blackwood family, but one image drew her in. Clara standing beside the mansion's front porch. Behind her, just barely visible, was a shadowy figure, taller than the child. Blurred, she traced it with her finger, whispering, "Who are you?" Coda suddenly growled from the window. Emily rushed over. There, in the field beyond the farmhouse, stood a man. Not close enough to see clearly, but close enough to know he was watching. Lightning flashed, and in that instant, she saw something, glinting in his hand, a key identical to hers. The storm hadn't let up all night. Rain hammered the farmhouse roof like 1,000 tiny fists, and the wind rattled the shutters until Emily thought the whole place might come apart. She sat curled on the couch, clutching a blanket around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the window where she'd seen the figure standing in the field. Coda hadn't left his post by the door. His ears stayed sharp, his body tense, as if he was waiting for something, someone, to return. Every time thunder cracked, he barked once, loud and commanding, as though warning the darkness itself to stay away. Emily wanted to call Ryan again, but she knew what he'd say. Lock the doors. Stay. Inside. Don't do anything stupid, except stupid had already happened. She'd gone inside that mansion, found a hidden passage, and brought home a key that didn't belong to her. And now someone else, someone who had another key, was circling her house like a wolf waiting for its chance. The clock struck midnight. That's when she heard it, a scrape at the back door. Her breath caught. Coda was already moving, muscles rippling as he stalked down the hallway. His growl rumbled low and steady, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards. Emily crept behind him, heart thudding. She reached the kitchen just in time to hear the doorknob jiggle. Once. Twice. Slowly, like whoever was outside wanted to test how strong the lock was. Lightning flashed, and in that split second, Emily saw the shadow of a man through the glass pane. Tall, broad-shouldered, standing still as if he knew she was watching. Coda lunged, teeth bared, barking so fiercely the window shook. The shadow disappeared. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, trembling. Whoever it was, they hadn't forced the door. Not yet. But they'd be back. She could feel it. The next morning, Ryan arrived after her frantic call. His cruiser splashed mud across the driveway, and he stepped out looking like he hadn't slept either. "You're telling me somebody tried to get in," he said, crouching to inspect the back door. "There were footprints," Emily insisted, "but the rain washed most of them away before I could show you." Ryan sighed, standing up. "Emily, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but without evidence, there's not much I can do. No broken locks, no forced entry." "There was someone there, Ryan," Emily snapped. "Coda saw him too. At the sound of his name," the German shepherd barked, pacing the kitchen. His body language said enough. Ryan rubbed his temples. "All right. I'll request extra patrols near your road, but you've got to give me something to work with." Emily hesitated, then pulled the iron key from her pocket. "This is what they want." Ryan frowned, taking it. The metal was cold, heavier than it looked. "You sure about that?" She nodded. Last night I saw him again. He was holding one just like it. Ryan's stomach dropped. Then it's not just about some old missing person. Somebody's using that place for something, and they don't want you poking around. Emily's eyes hardened. Then we have to find out what it is. Later that day, Emily couldn't sit still. She wandered from room to room, Coda shadowing her every move. Every creak of the farmhouse made her jump. She double-checked the locks 3 times. By afternoon, the storm broke into a weak drizzle, and the fields steamed under the returning sun. Emily stood on the porch, trying to breathe. Normally, when Coda froze at her side, his ears pricked, his gaze fixed on the tree line beyond the barn. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. He growled low, tail stiff, and then Emily saw it too. A flicker of movement, just a shoulder, a flash of dark clothing, disappearing into the woods. Without thinking, she unclipped Coda's leash. "Go!" The shepherd bolted across the yard, muscles surging, his bark echoing through the wet fields. Emily sprinted after him, her shoes sinking into mud. They reached the edge of the woods, branches whipping against her arms. Coda darted ahead, nose to the ground, then stopped abruptly at a fallen log. He barked furiously, teeth snapping at the air. Emily skidded to a halt, panting. "What is it? Where'd he go?" Her flashlight beam, though it was daytime, the woods were dim under the heavy canopy, caught something carved into the bark of the log. A symbol, the same circle and slash she'd seen on the tunnel walls. Fresh, carved deep, like a warning. Emily's stomach twisted. The intruder hadn't just been watching, he was leaving signs. That night she couldn't shake the feeling that the farmhouse walls were closing in. She tried to distract herself with homework, with music, with anything. But her mind kept drifting back to the woods, to the carving, to the man's shadow on her porch. She finally drifted into a light sleep near dawn. Coda stretched across the foot of her bed. And that's when it happened. A crash. Shattering glass. Emily bolted upright as Coda launched off the bed, barking violently. She grabbed her phone, heart hammering, and flicked on the hall light. The living room window was shattered, shards glittering across the rug. Curtains flapped in the cold night air. Coda stood rigid, teeth bared at the opening. Emily's throat tightened. Someone was inside. She heard footsteps, heavy, slow, moving toward her kitchen. Coda didn't wait. He charged. Emily scrambled after him, clutching her phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. "There's someone in my house," she cried to the dispatcher. "Please send someone now." From the kitchen came a yell, followed by the sounds of a struggle, snarls, growls, the crash of furniture. Emily ran in to find Coda locked onto the arm of a man dressed in black, dragging him down to the floor. The man fought back, kicking wildly, but Coda's jaws held firm. His eyes blazed, every muscle straining as he pinned the intruder. "Stay down!" Emily screamed, brandishing a kitchen knife she'd grabbed from the counter. The man froze, breath ragged. His ski mask slipped, revealing sharp eyes and a scar running down his cheek. "You shouldn't have gone into the house," he spat, voice low and menacing. Emily's blood ran cold. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The man twisted suddenly, punching Coda hard in the side. The shepherd yelped but didn't let go. Emily lunged forward, slashing the knife through the air. The intruder jerked, back and in the chaos. He managed to shove Coda away just long enough to dive through the broken window. By the time Ryan and the deputies arrived, the intruder was gone, vanished into the woods, leaving nothing but footprints and broken glass behind. Emily dropped the knife, shaking, tears streaking down her cheeks. She sank to the floor, clutching Coda's fur. "You saved me," she whispered. Coda licked her hand, tail wagging weakly, though his eyes stayed fixed on the window, as if daring the man to come back. Later, as officers swept the property, Ryan knelt beside her. "You okay?" Emily nodded shakily. He knew. He knew I went inside. He said I shouldn't have opened it." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Then whatever's behind that gate, it's not just some old secret. Somebody's protecting it, and they're willing to kill to keep it hidden." Emily looked out at the tree, line, her heart heavy. The mystery of Clara Blackwood, the symbols, the laughter, everything was tangled together. And now she knew one thing for sure. They weren't dealing with ghosts. They were dealing with people. Dangerous ones. And the only way to survive was to uncover the truth before the intruder struck again. Coda pressed against her side, his steady presence reminding her she wasn't alone. Not now. Not ever. The morning after the break-in, the farmhouse, felt different. Not home, not safe. Just hollow. Every shattered shard of glass in the living room seemed to glint like a reminder. You are not alone. They are watching. Emily swept the last of the broken window into a trash bag, her hands trembling despite the sunlight pouring through the open space. Coda padded close behind her, limping slightly where the intruder had kicked him. Every time, she looked at the bruise forming on his side, her chest tightened with guilt. "You saved me," she whispered, crouching to kiss the top of his head. His brown eyes softened, though his ears stayed pricked toward the fields outside. Always alert, always guarding. Ryan Blake showed up an hour later. He looked worse than she felt, hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes, his uniform shirt, buttoned wrong at the collar. He had been up all night writing his report, trying to make sense of what had happened without exposing just how far down the rabbit hole they had already gone. "Any luck?" Emily asked, setting a mug of coffee. In front of him at the kitchen table, Ryan rubbed his temples. "We've got deputies canvassing the woods, but with all that rain last night, footprints are gone. No cameras out here, no neighbors nearby. Guy might as well have vanished into thin air." Emily folded her arms. Except he didn't vanish. "He came from that mansion. He knows what's down there." Ryan sighed. "Emily, we're in over our heads. This isn't just a trespassing case anymore. This is organized." She frowned. "Organized how?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thin folder. "I dug through the county archives last night, old records, property deeds, court files. The Blackwood family wasn't just wealthy, they were connected." Emily leaned closer as he flipped the folder open. Inside were photocopies of yellowed documents, land ownership maps, tax disputes, court hearings. At the center of it all, the Blackwood estate. They owned half this county in the late 1800s, Ryan explained. Mills, farmland, even the Tau railroad spur. But in 1896, after Clara disappeared, everything collapsed. Lawsuits, debts, rumors of fraud. Within a year, both parents were dead. Emily tapped the page. "And the daughter? Clara?" Ryan shook his head. "Nothing. It's like she vanished off the earth. But get this." He slid another photocopy across the table. It was a scan of a handwritten letter. Its ink faded but still legible. July 14th, 1894. "The order will not forgive what has been hidden. The child is the key. Keep the passage sealed." Emily's breath caught. "The order? What does that mean?" Ryan leaned back. "That's what I want to know. Whatever it was, it scared the family enough to bury it. And if those carvings in the tunnel are the same symbols." Emily felt a chill creep down her spine. "Then whoever broke into my house last night, they're part of it." Coda barked suddenly, sharp and insistent. He stood at the window, tail stiff, ears forward. Emily and Ryan rushed over, nothing but the empty field stretched outside. Still, Ryan's hand went to his holster. He knows something's out there. Later that afternoon, Ryan took Emily into town. They parked in front of the old Clearwater Historical Society, a 2-story brick building that smelled of dust and lemon polish. Inside, shelves sagged under the weight of ledgers and photographs, most untouched for decades. The volunteer at the front desk, Mrs. Avery, raised a brow at them. "You kids doing a school project?" "Something like that," Ryan said, flashing. His badge just enough to make her nod and let them pass. Emily and Ryan spent hours digging through bound newspapers and census records. Coda lay curled at Emily's feet, occasionally lifting his head when the floorboards creaked. Finally, Emily froze at a newspaper clipping from 1895. "Mysterious Society alleged in Blackwood scandal." She read aloud. Whispers continue regarding a secret society said to meet in the caverns beneath Blackwood Hill. While no proof has surfaced, townsfolk claim strange symbols and candlelit gatherings have been seen. Sheriff declined to comment. Ryan muttered, "Caverns. That's got to be what's behind that gate." Emily scanned further. Listen to this. Several prominent men of the county believed to be involved, though names are withheld for fear of libel. Her heart thumped. Prominent men. That means they had power, influence. Ryan's jaw tightened. And if descendants are still around, that might explain why someone today wants it buried. Emily closed the clipping with trembling hands. So Clara wasn't just a missing girl. She was part of something much bigger. Coda whined softly, resting his chin on her knee. His steady presence grounded her, reminded her she wasn't facing this alone. Driving back from town, the sun dipped low, painting the fields orange and gold. For a moment, everything looked normal, even beautiful. But Emily's stomach churned with unease. Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. That's odd. Call came in from dispatch. Someone reported movement out near the old Blackwood cemetery. That's less than a mile from the mansion. Emily gripped the wheel tighter. Let's go. Ryan gave her a sharp look. Emily. We don't have a choice, she interrupted. If they're meeting there, we need to know. They reached the cemetery just as twilight fell. The iron gate was half collapsed, weeds curling through the cracks in the stone wall. Headstones leaned at odd angles, names worn down by more than a century of rain and sun. Coda moved ahead, silent now, his body taut with focus. Emily followed with Ryan at her side, flashlight beam sweeping across the graves. Something about the air felt wrong, too still, as if the whole place was holding its breath. Then Coda stopped dead. His nose twitched, his ears locked forward. Ryan caught the movement at the same time, shadows near the far edge of the cemetery. Figures in dark clothing clustered around an open grave. Emily's heart slammed in her chest. Ryan. Stay back, he whispered, hand on his gun. But Coda had other plans. With a bark that split the night, he charged forward, dragging Emily a few feet before she unclipped his leash. The figures jolted, their faces hidden by masks, and scattered into the trees. One dropped something, a lantern that spilled orange light across the grass. Emily and Ryan sprinted forward. The grave wasn't empty. Inside lay bones. Small ones. Too small. Emily gasped, clutching her mouth. Oh my God. Ryan pulled her back, his face pale. We're leaving. Now. But before they could retreat, a voice rang out from the trees. You should have stayed away. The words echoed across the cemetery, followed by the sound of footsteps vanishing into the night. Coda stood at the grave's edge, teeth bared, growling at the darkness. Emily's whole body shook, but she forced herself to meet Ryan's eyes. They know we're close, and they're not going to stop. Ryan clenched his jaw. Then neither are we. That night, Emily lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The image of those bones haunted her. She didn't know whose they were, Clara's or someone else's, but she knew one thing for certain. The Blackwood mansion wasn't just a relic of history. It was the center of something that had never died. And now, thanks to Coda, she was, standing right in the middle of it. Coda lifted his head from the rug, ears pricked, his eyes locked on the window, as if he already sensed what was coming next. Emily whispered into the darkness, "Whatever you're hiding, we'll find it." The image of the open grave in the cemetery refused to leave Emily's mind. Even the next morning, sunlight pouring through the kitchen window did nothing to wash it away. Every bite of toast turned to ash in her mouth. Every creak of the farmhouse reminded her that someone somewhere was watching. Ryan sat at the table, his uniform jacket draped over the chair, a fresh report half written in front of him. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. Coda lay at Emily's feet, head resting on his paws, but his ears flicked at every sound. He hadn't relaxed since the night of the break-in. Finally, Ryan spoke. his voice low. "We can't wait anymore. Whatever's behind that gate, we need to see it." Emily's chest tightened. Part of her wanted to scream at him to tell him she'd already seen enough. The bones, the masks, the writing on her window. But another part of her, the part that had walked into the mansion in the first place, knew he was right. "They're not going to stop," she whispered. "Not until we do." Ryan nodded grimly. "Then we finish this." They drove to the mansion in Ryan's cruiser just after dusk. The July air was heavy, thick with the buzz of cicadas. A storm was brewing again, the horizon dark with rolling clouds. Emily carried a backpack stuffed with flashlights, extra batteries, gloves, and bottles of water. Ryan had borrowed a pair of bolt cutters from the station, without signing them out. He didn't want questions he couldn't answer. As they pulled up to the base of the hill, Emily felt her stomach drop. The mansion loomed above them, a black silhouette against the darkening sky. Its broken windows stared down like hollow eyes. Coda whined softly, nose pressed against the window. He was ready. "All right," Ryan muttered. "Let's get this over with." Inside, the mansion felt colder than before. Their footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Dust rose in their flashlight beams, and somewhere deep in the house, water dripped steadily. Coda led them straight to the hidden passage behind the staircase, his tail stiff, ears sharp. Emily peeled back the wallpaper again, slid the iron key into the lock, and turned. The panel creaked open. A rush of damp air hit her face, smelling of stone and mildew. They descended. The tunnel was darker than Emily remembered, her flashlight beam swallowed by the damp stone walls. The carving stood out sharper now, fresh scratches among the older ones, circles with slashes, triangles overlapping. Ryan ran his hand over one of the fresher marks. These weren't made 100 years ago. Somebody's been keeping this alive. Emily shivered. "But why?" Coda growled softly, pulling them forward. The iron gate loomed at the tunnel's end, its bars thick and black. The modern combination lock still hung from the latch, gleaming in their lights. Ryan set down the bolt cutters. "Stand back," Emily pulled Coda close as Ryan clamped the jaws of the cutters around the lock. With a sharp grunt, he pressed down. The lock snapped. The sound echoed like a gunshot. For a moment, the tunnel held its breath. Then Ryan pulled the gate open with a groan of rusted hinges. Beyond lay darkness. Deeper. Colder. Coda barked once, sharp and commanding, then stepped through. The tunnel widened into a chamber. Their flashlights swept across stone walls covered in chalk markings, symbols like the ones in the mansion, but larger, overlapping, drawn in layers over time. Circles, triangles, letters Emily didn't recognize. In the center of the chamber stood a long wooden table. Candles, burned down to stubs, sat along its edge. Papers were scattered across it, damp from the moisture in the air. Emily picked one, up carefully. The handwriting was modern. The order remains. Protect what lies beneath. Her throat tightened. "Ryan, this is recent." Before he could answer, Coda's growl reverberated through the chamber. He stood at the far wall, pawing at the stone, his nose pressed against a seam Emily hadn't noticed before. A narrow door cut into the rock, nearly invisible. Ryan shone his light on it. "Looks like another passage." Emily's pulse quickened. "We have to see." Ryan hesitated, then pressed his shoulder against the stone. It gave way slowly, grinding open to reveal another corridor. The smell hit them first: earth, dampness, and something faintly metallic. Blood. They followed the corridor deeper, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the dirt floor. The walls here weren't carved stone. They were natural rock, twisting downward like a cave. At the end, the passage opened into another chamber, smaller but more unsettling. Wooden crates were stacked against the wall, some broken open. Inside were scraps of fabric, rusted tools, and bones. Not old, crumbling bones like in the cemetery. These looked newer, cleaner. Emily's stomach turned. "Oh my God." Ryan's jaw tightened. This isn't just history. Somebody's been using this place. Coda sniffed one of the crates, then growled, his fur bristling. He barked, the sound bouncing off the stone, sharp and warning. Then Emily heard it. Footsteps, not echoes of their own. Different ones, heavier, coming from deeper in the tunnels. Ryan swung his flashlight toward the sound, hand on his gun. We're not alone. Emily's heart pounded. She clutched Coda's collar, pulling him close. A shadow flickered across the far wall. Back, Ryan hissed, motioning toward the gate. Now. They hurried, Coda pulling at the leash, snarling at the darkness. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped abruptly. Silence pressed in, heavier than stone. Emily's skin prickled. She whispered, "They're watching us." Ryan shoved her forward. "Move!" They sprinted back through the chamber, through the gate, up the narrow stairs. Coda barked fiercely the whole way, his voice filling the mansion's hollow halls. By the time they burst back into the entryway, Emily's chest heaved with panic. Ryan slammed the panel shut, heart hammering. For a long moment they just stood there, listening. Nothing followed, but the silence felt worse than footsteps. It meant whoever was down there wanted them to know they were being allowed to leave. Back, at the farmhouse, Emily collapsed onto the couch, clutching Coda. Her hands shook so badly she could barely untie his harness. Ryan paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "We can't keep this quiet anymore. We need backup. FBI, state police, somebody bigger than me." Emily shook her head. "They'll bury it, just like they buried Clara. You know they will." Ryan stopped, staring at her. "Then what do you suggest?" She swallowed hard. "We find proof. Something they can't erase. Something they can't deny." Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but Coda barked sharply at the window, cutting him off. Emily turned. There, across the field, just at the tree line, stood a figure. Masked, still as stone. Watching. Lightning flashed, and when it did, she saw the reflection of another iron key dangling from his hand. That night, Emily wrote in her journal until her hand cramped. Every detail, the carvings, the crates, the papers, the footsteps. She wrote it all down, knowing if anything happened to her, someone had to know. Coda lay pressed against her side, his body warm and steady. He hadn't left her alone once. She looked down at him, stroking his fur. "It's us against them. Boy, just us." His eyes gleamed in the dim light, fierce and loyal, and deep in the mansion's tunnels, somewhere beyond that gate, the secret waited, still hidden, still alive. The night after their return from the tunnels, Emily couldn't shake the image of the masked figure holding a key across the field. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him again, silent, unflinching, waiting. Coda had barely slept. He paced the farmhouse floor like a soldier on duty, ears flicking at the slightest sound. At dawn, he pressed his head against Emily's arm, nudging her awake. His brown eyes said everything. We can't stay still, not when danger is this close. By mid-morning, Ryan was back. He'd barely left in the first place. He stood at the kitchen counter, tie loosened, eyes red from lack of sleep. He dropped a stack of papers onto the table. I pulled what I could from the county records, he said. But this doesn't make sense. Emily sat down, Coda at her feet. What doesn't? Ryan flipped through the stack, laying out property, deeds, and genealogical charts. The Blackwood land didn't just vanish after the family died. It got sold, piece by piece, to people whose names are still familiar in Clearwater. Emily scanned the pages. Miller, Green, Davenport. She looked up sharply. Those are the names on the town council. Ryan nodded grimly. And the sheriff's great-grandfather. Emily Carter didn't remember how she slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the masked figures in the mansion's window, staring down at her like shadows that would never leave. The notebook lay on her desk, its black leather, cover gleaming faintly in the lamplight. She hadn't dared to open it again since they'd escaped. She didn't need to. She already knew what it held. Names. People she'd grown up with. People who ran Clearwater. People who now wanted her dead. Coda hadn't left her side. He paced the room, ears pricked, tail stiff, moving between the door and the window like he was expecting someone to burst in at any second. When he finally lay down, his body curled tight against the bed, his eyes stayed open, watching, guarding. By morning, Ryan was back at the farmhouse. He looked ragged, shirt wrinkled, stubble dark on his jaw, but his eyes carried the same fire as the night before. He set his phone on the table with a heavy sigh. I tried sending the photos to my captain. They never went through. Emily frowned. What do you mean, never went through? Ryan tapped the screen. Blocked. Every time I attach them, the system rejects it. It's like someone on the inside is filtering what gets sent. Emily's stomach turned cold. So it's worse than we thought? Ryan leaned forward. We can't trust anyone local, not the sheriff, not the council, maybe not even the state police. This goes higher than that. Emily rubbed her forehead. Then what do? We can't fight an entire town. Ryan's eyes flicked toward the notebook. We use their own records against them. We take it straight to the press. Emily's pulse quickened. The Richmond papers, or even Washington. Ryan nodded. Somebody bigger than Clearwater. Somebody they can't silence. Coda barked once, sharp and insistent, as if to say, that's the only way. But even as they made plans, trouble found them. That afternoon, Emily drove into town to buy supplies. Flash, drives, extra batteries, paper for copies. She pulled into the general store parking lot, Coda in the passenger seat. The moment she stepped out, conversation stopped. Mrs. Miller, who usually smiled at her, looked away quickly. Mr. Green, standing by the hardware shelves, muttered something to another man, and both of them laughed under their breath. Everywhere she turned, eyes followed her. Emily's hands shook as she grabbed what she needed. She could feel the weight of their stares, like the entire town knew she had broken some unspoken rule. When she reached the counter, the clerk leaned forward, voice low. Careful, Emily. Some doors don't need opening. Her throat tightened. She paid quickly and hurried out, Coda growling the whole way back to the car. By the time she reached the farmhouse, she was shaking. Ryan, she said, slamming the supplies on the table. They know. Everyone in that town knows. Ryan's face hardened. Then we're running out of time. That evening they sat on the porch steps as the sun sank behind the fields. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of rain. Ryan studied the horizon, jaw tight. We need to go back. Tonight. If we wait, they'll move everything. Burn them, records. Bury the evidence deeper than before. Emily clutched Coda's collar. But we barely made it out last time. Ryan looked at her, his expression steady. This time, we're ready. Coda pressed against her leg, warm and solid. His steady gaze told her what she already knew. They couldn't back down now. They returned to the mansion under cover of darkness. Clouds swallowed the moon, plunging the hill into blackness. The front gate still stood wide open, swinging in, the wind. Inside, the air felt charged, as if the house itself was waiting for them. Their flashlights cut thin beams through the dust and shadows. The tunnel swallowed them again. The iron gate creaked open under Ryan's grip. But this time, the chamber wasn't empty. Candles burned fresh on the table. Papers were stacked neatly in piles. And on the wall, painted in dripping red letters, were the words, "The child is the key." Emily's heart thudded. Oh God. Ryan raised his gun, scanning the shadows. They knew we'd come back. Coda barked sharply, head snapping toward the far passage. His body stiffened, hackles up. He growled, low and dangerous. Footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate. Then a figure stepped into the candlelight, masked, cloaked in dark fabric, taller than the others they'd seen before. The figure's voice was calm, almost casual. You shouldn't have brought the dog. Emily's grip tightened on Coda's harness. What do you mean the child is the key? What happened to Clara? The figure tilted his head, silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, low, chilling. Clara was never lost. She was chosen. Before Emily could ask what that meant, more footsteps filled the chamber, figures emerging from every tunnel surrounding them. Ryan hissed, "We're outnumbered." Coda barked furiously, lunging forward, his growl echoing off the stone. Emily's heart pounded. She clutched the notebook in her pack, the only proof they had left. Ryan's voice was steady, but his eyes burned. "We fight our way out, no other choice." The masked figures closed in. Candles flickered. The air grew heavy with the sound of shuffling feet, and in that moment Emily knew the storm had finally broken. Thank you so much for following along with Emily, Ryan, and Coda's journey. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Clara Blackwood was really chosen by the society, or was she a victim like Emily fears?